And we are recording. Joshua, welcome to the Honey Badger Diaries. Are you hearing me? Hello, hello.
Hello. Yeah, it sort of went. Okay, now it's good.
You're hearing me?
Yeah. It froze for a second there.
Okay, I'm gonna just say the same thing again, and I'm gonna cut this first couple of seconds off of the podcast recording.
Do it.
Joshua, welcome to the Honey Badger Diaries.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here. Yeah.
Thanks for being on, man. I contacted you on Telegram today, and I asked how are you doing, and your answer was I'm getting used to this strange life directed by David Lynch.
Yeah, yeah. It really feels like that. You know, you go outside and all the beer gardens are like got cobwebs, but it's a beautiful spring day. And you think this isn't Germany. You know, this isn't the Berlin I'm used to.
Right. Oh yeah, that's it's like a zombie movie with everything abandoned.
It's really, really weird.
You went to you told me you're in Potsdam right now. You're not in your usual apartment.
Yeah, I decided to go to Potsdam because my apartment in Berlin is facing just the wrong direction. It has no sun. It gets like a tiniest bit of sun, but it's all just reflective light. I thought, man, if I'm going to be hocked down for 3 months at home with my wife and baby, I want to have like a balcony at least with some sun. So and this was before the lockdown happened, but I knew it would, watching every other country slowly getting swamped.
Yeah, it's a great prepper mindset you have. Are you a prepper? Would you consider yourself a prepper?
Yeah, and the funny thing is, every time I've prepped, it's been like a false start. So my family was laughing at me. They were angry at me for like even bringing it up this time. And people that don't even know me, were getting really pissed off at me. But I'll get to that.
They said you were causing panic or something like that?
Yeah, totally. Like they would be like really angry. They'd be, you're causing panic. What are you doing? And I know, I'm just casually saying, hey, you might want to go to the supermarket and pick up maybe like 2 months worth of food, because we don't know. Everything's last minute supply chain here. And if everything goes into lockdown, how are people are going to get food to the supermarket? You don't want to be standing in those lines. You just would rather be waiting.
You'd rather have it, and it's a very small investment to make sure you have it, to avoid having to do that kind of shit when you don't want to. I totally agree. I had the same thing. Yeah.
Did you get anger?
What's that?
Were people angry at you, or like weird responses?
I would say a little bit ridiculed.
Yeah.
Angry, maybe not so much, but definitely a bit ridiculed here and there. But I'm a Bitcoiner, I'm used to being ridiculed. So that's
yeah. Man, I feel the same. And it's funny. I was telling someone the other day as well. Now, once everything got locked down, the same people that were sort of getting mad at me or ridiculing me are the ones now calling for extraordinary. Not all of them, but some of them calling for really harsh penalties on people and draconian laws and apps and ankle bracelets and who knows what they're asking for. But weird. And I was just thinking, man, what's the world turning into?
Talk me through this. This is how I usually start my podcasts. What has been happening in Germany over the past couple of weeks? And I start my podcast by now. Most countries sort of have the same story, so I don't want to dwell on it too much. But like, what has been happening?
Yeah.
How did it spread? What measures were taken? In a nutshell.
Yeah, I mean, basically, when the princess ship was getting overrun, and the more and more news started taking it seriously and started reporting it over and over. And then people would start saying, oh, the news is just causing panic. And I'm like, no, they're not. They're like literally just telling you that, hey, this is to be taken seriously. And then, of course, the weird thing was Frau Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, she was in Wuhan like 3 or 4 weeks before it sort of went crazy at a factory
That's
down there.
by coincidence. She
Yeah,
wasn't
by
there
coincidence. And no, she wasn't there for the thing. But she was at a factory saying how good globalization was, and we've got, you know, the factories over there. And then it was some of those factory workers that came back to Germany that had the first cases in Germany. And she didn't get it, so that's great. But it was a weird coincidence, yeah. And you know, the Germans.
Wait, hang on. Did you mentioned factory workers from Wuhan got back to Germany and she was there? Did this had something to do with each other? Did they go with her?
I don't think so. It was just a weird coincidence, and I don't know the full extent of it. This was I'm just telling from secondhand. In fact, I haven't fact checked this, but someone who I trust pretty well said that she was over there giving a talk about 3 weeks before it sort of started going crazy over in China, well, that we know of, and then she came back here, and then independently, some of those workers also came back to Germany in some small town, and that was the first case here. And then people were like, oh wow, you know, but they still didn't take it seriously. And I talked to my colleagues at work. I brought in my HR person, and I said, look, we've got to start preparing the company for home office. And the good thing was this? This was in late February.
Yeah, you're definitely a prepper.
Yeah. I was getting laughed at, and all my staff, they're like, they're all young, sort of, you know, and they're like, and some of them even said, I'm not bloody buying into this shit fear. You know, they're really sort of, you know, this sort of, you're trying to disrupt my life sort of thing. And I'm like, okay. I mean, and then I ended up giving them the choice. Well, you can work in the office if you want, but I would recommend you work from home because a lot of people have to catch the U-Bahn. And if you've got a bicycle, sure, have fun. But I'm not going to stop anyone from working from home. And that was kind of the good roundabout way of dealing with this in terms of people not really understanding. I mean, I understand that too. They've never experienced anything. I've never experienced anything like this. But it was good that one of a couple of employees had already started working from Austria, and they sort of moved anyway. So we were already starting to practice working outside of the office and being a bit more decentralized in terms of our team. And so it kind of worked. And funnily enough, our communication has gotten better as a company. With Slack, everything's written down. You know, it's not just casual conversation that gets forgotten. Oh, you said you were going to do that, but you haven't. Instead, it's all written on Slack, you know, and so it's kind of weird like that. But yeah, it's one thing I do think of when we're, you know, all working from home is, look, if you're working on the toilet or you're working in your pajamas in bed, then you're doing it wrong, because that's a slippery slope to depression and all sorts of things that if you don't, you know, get dressed for work. I mean, this is the other extreme. You get dressed for work, and if you're lucky enough to have a spare room as an office, go there and do work. And then when you leave, go out. Try to separate it even at home, because if you start just always working, you'll get trapped and you'll always be working. I mean, as a CEO, I'm always working anyway, but my colleagues, the people working for us, shouldn't be. You know, they need to have that balance, and I think this is something that people learn how to work from home.
Yeah. So then, obviously, through March, the virus started to spread through Germany as well. There was a step-by-step process of sort of shutting down the country in a way. And then at some point, Merkel, like Boris Johnson and my prime minister, at some point she mentions that probably everyone's got to get it, or a lot of people are going to get it. It's sort of this herd immunity strategy. Is this still the strategy in Germany? Have they said anything about this recently?
Yeah, they've started saying that maybe on the 19th of April, we'll start to let people out again to to open things up, but we will protect the elderly and people with underlying conditions. So this is the same strategy Sweden's had since the start, actually, and as you probably know. And so, I think that's a sensible strategy. You know, if I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of, you know, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I think vaccines are amazing. They're a great technology. The science is very good on them. But at the same time, I feel like the incentives are all wrong with vaccines, because the whole thing of anti-vax and for-vax is a stupid conversation anyway, because some vaccines are dangerous. Some vaccines are not dangerous. Some vaccines are dangerous for some people. Some vaccines are not dangerous for others. Some vaccines, you know, so so I'm not like that, but I'm just saying that I don't think there's going to be a vaccine for a long time for this. And I think cures are always better than vaccines, because vaccines, you're always going to have the outliners that aren't going to want to take one. So that's where that breaks down. Plus the incentives are wrong. The vaccines make a whole lot of profit for companies, whereas the cure makes less profit, because you have to have only the sick to send, you know, just try to spend money.
Well,
And,
I think one of the I do think that with vaccines, not everyone necessarily has to take it, right? It needs to be 80% or something like that. So if there are some outliers, that's still fine.
That's still fine. Yeah. I mean, we'll see what happens. I'm already starting to see glimpses of America saying that it's forced vaccination for this. I saw that headline today, so we'll see what happens there. It's also this.
So
This
you
is
would
also
be
what I find.
against that, I think, or that's what you're
Yeah,
suggesting, right? Yeah.
I'm against it because a lot of the vaccine technology that they're trying are really experimental, and they're rushing it through. And there have been vaccines that have been bad, and you can look at some of there was an oral vaccine of polio that was creating cancer. They had to pull it. There's you know, it's the history of vaccines aren't all rosy and fun like a lot of people make it out to be, and it's also not ridiculously scary like a lot of other anti-vaxxers say. There's a big gray scale there, and this conversation of anti or for is like saying you're anti-antibiotics and pro antibiotics. This is a silly conversation. There's nuances that need to be
Yeah, I'm definitely against mandatory vaccines for the same reason that I'm in favor of legalizing drugs. It should be totally your decision what you put in your own body. Like if you can't decide what you put in your own body, then what can you decide? That should be a certainty.
Yeah, and you know, cures are so great. I mean, why shouldn't we work on cures instead, figuring out how to develop antibodies that you can put in at the time of being sick, or you know, these systems. It's almost like people are just so obsessed with vaccinations, which is curing something before you get it.
Yeah, well, to be clear, I might take a vaccine myself. I don't know. That depends on the vaccine or whatever. But I'm definitely against forced vaccine.
Yeah, I think I would definitely consider it too, taking it.
Yeah. That was a small sidestep into vaccines.
Yeah, I don't know why.
Just to get back, well, it's interesting, so that's fine. Just to get back to the situation, how strict is the lockdown in Germany? Can people still walk outside, go to the park?
The thing is, I don't watch too much news, and because I don't like mandatory stuff, I tend to do stuff that I like. My philosophy is, it's the same with crypto. Companies should be as transparent as possible, so that governments don't have an excuse to smash their authoritarian hammer down on your head. And that's the same with this. I'd rather just go into lockdown by myself without anyone telling me what to do, and sort of let the wind blow over, and then come out and go, okay, cool, I did it myself without, you know. So I'm not too sure. What I do know is that that there are fines for going places that you shouldn't be. I have heard that. I don't know how strict they are, if they're just threats there. I have driven around a little bit, and there's fencing around, like, just, you know, like red and yellow tape around parks and playgrounds and things like that to stop people sunbaking. Because, you know, coming from a colder climate country yourself, you know, as soon as you see the sun, people are like, yeah, and they're like in the parks or at the pubs or at the beer gardens, after a long
Life
winter. So
life starts again.
life starts again, and it's really strange not being able to do that. But yeah, I don't know how strict they are, but I think Germans are very sort of, if there's a rule, they'll just stick to it without too many dealing with fines. Yeah.
But you mentioned you find it reasonable. So I mean, in the Bitcoin space, we also, I don't. Do you actually consider yourself a libertarian? I think so, right?
Yeah. I
So
even go further to
right.
like anarcho-capitalist. But I mean, when I talk about anarcho-capitalism, it's more just philosophical dreaming of how, just ideas. I don't know if it's
Yeah.
possible. But
So I think I feel similar as you. Like I will stay inside regardless of what my government tells me because that's what I want to do and that's what I
yeah,
feel is the smart thing to do. And
yeah,
ideally, it's what most people should do. But at
yeah,
the same time, I don't really like that the government is sort of forcing people. It should be this mandatory thing. So I think
yeah,
we agree there as well. Then probably right.
yeah, yeah,
In what's one thing I've seen is no, I've seen two interesting things about Germany. One is at least a couple of weeks ago they had a fairly low case fatality rate, and people were
yeah,
sort of showing these stats that Germany is very different. But I think by now it's actually getting more to normal figures. So
mm.
there was probably just some kind of lag. Or do you know anything about this?
Yeah. I couldn't figure it out either. The case fatality rates was way below everyone else. It was strange, but then I think the reporting changed. So what they started to do was report everything. So if you died of a cancer and you happen to have COVID, then they would report it as a COVID now. So in the early days, I think they were saying, oh, he died of cancer and he just happened to have COVID. So, but it's a cancer death. But now, I think a few weeks ago, they switched it so everything sort of equalized. And I'm not sure if that's a good thing or bad thing. I'm not sure. I mean, it seems to me like COVID-19 really is one of those, it's very, so it's kind of similar, like AIDS and HIV. It kills people by allowing other things in. The COVID doesn't really kill you. It's more pneumonia will kill you. Or other things, or it just weakens your immune system to the hell, and then you're just trashed.
Yeah, possibly. We know very little, of course. So yeah, that's definitely possible. The other thing that I noticed was that in Germany, hospitals are not being overrun, as far as I know. They seem to have
No,
a lot of intensive care capacity over there.
yeah, it's weird. I talked to a friend of mine who's a doctor, and he said we've got about 1,500 ICU beds taken up, and we've got 7,000 of them. So we've still got a lot of capacity. And I was like, oh wow, that's amazing. But saying that, the one in Potsdam where I'm staying right now, the hospital here apparently is overrun because the doctors have all gotten sick, and that has really caused that hospital. So I think it's very isolated to where you are. I think Berlin isn't. It's got and Berlin for some reason it has a lot of hospitals. Like just in my district, there's like 5 of them, like near me. I don't know why there's so many, but it's they're very well sorted out in terms of masks and stuff. They're not. So if you go to a chemist, a drugstore, as they call them in America, they're really not prepared. They don't have any masks for their staff. They have sort of they got like picture frames that they've made and made it themselves and put a little hole in them so they could pass money through and stuff. But very underprepared in that sense. But the hospitals seem pretty good. Yeah.
Is that because there's just way more money going to hospitals in Germany? Do you know that or not?
Yeah. So the medical system in Germany is quite interesting. I really like it. It's privately. It's all insurance, but if you don't have a job, then the government will pay for your insurance. And so insurance is a nice mechanism. I've always found insurance is good because it's pooling the money of many to, pay for the unfortunate few. And this is generally something like the NHS is the same thing, except it's all government. And then you get knock-on effects where people just take the piss. They charge through the roof because it's just government money. They just, and eventually the system sort of can't keep up. And whereas with insurances, they still kind of want to know, hey, this seems a bit expensive or over the top. But Germany also has a little bit of that socialist unhanging as well. So they sort of protect. So there's certain regulations of how expensive certain things can get. But yeah, we'll see what happens in the long term. I think the hospital system's pretty good here. I mean, America, I've always been, since the start of this, being that prepper mindset, I automatically started thinking about my friends in the States and seeing that their system just isn't ready for it. Plus their mentality isn't ready for it because they're like real freedom loving, church visiting, God fearing, like no one's going to stop me from getting together in my church and singing for the Lord, and you just think, oh God, what's going to happen there? They're going to meet Jesus pretty quick.
I shouldn't laugh at that, but yeah.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. It's this dark humor, the gallows, the humor from the gallows.
Yeah, well, I think we have a fairly similar hospital system with the insurance mechanism here, but still hospitals are here a bit more in trouble. So some Dutch patients are going to Germany now. So that's something.
Are they?
Yeah, that would be something interesting to look in some other time. Maybe you'll get someone on the show who's an expert in hospitals.
Yeah, I don't know
and also
why.
a Bitcoiner.
I mean, it might have been because of after the Second World War and the Cold War, you had the Americans here, you had the French here, and all these army bases. And armies run like their own country. Like an army, the American army can survive in its own. They have everything in itself. They have their own hospital system, their own legal system, their own everything, food supply. Everything is its own thing. So, and that's the same for most armies. So, Berlin especially was, run by 4 countries, and so they would have had all of their stuff and army bases and barracks and things, and maybe that's a knock-on effect, and that's why there's so many hospitals. I'm not sure. That's just a guess.
Interesting theory. Okay, before Bitcoin, you were already a gold bug, I think, or not?
Yeah.
What made
After
you Oh, I was just gonna ask, what made you a gold bug?
Yeah, it was pretty much 9/11. I just, when those planes hit, I thought, man, I got to follow the money. Something doesn't sit right here. It can't be someone hates freedom. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And what made sense a little bit was like, well, the Russians were smashing Afghanistan for ages, but that was the Russians. So why all of a sudden? None of it made sense. So then, of course, you follow the money, you dive into the conspiracy theories, you get really deep in there. And what it came down to was, my God, the monetary system of the world is just kaput. It's just a ridiculous farce where it's run by a few very wealthy families, these private central banking mechanisms. And the way that governments borrow money from private central banks through bonds, and everything was like, what's going on? And then realizing that they can print money out of nowhere, and being an Australian, seeing property prices just going up and up and up and up and up, and thinking, this seems really manipulated. What's going on? I think it's the money supply, and it sort of fit together, because Australia has so much land, yet why is property prices so high? And then, of course, the gold. I just started buying and silver and gold, and listening to economic theory from the Austrian school, and trying to understand boom and bust cycles, and then that then fell down the path of Bitcoin later on, but for other reasons actually.
You did make a jump there, and I'm not sure how long it would take you to explain this. If it's too long, maybe we just skip it or keep it for another day. But you made the jump from 9/11 to central banks, and I'm wondering what's the connection? Connect the dots for me.
Well, the connection was follow the money. In any crime scene, you should follow the money. So my interest wasn't follow the nonsense of they hate our freedoms, but who's making money from this? Why did Wall Street what was it? No, it was Giuliani. Rudy Giuliani said everyone, the air's safe to breathe. You can go back to work now on Wall Street. And it wasn't. There was asbestos flying everywhere. And of course, they didn't want the stock exchange. They wanted the stock exchange back up and running. So that there, first of all, is a major crime. You're putting people at danger. And then started focusing also on the warring profits and profiteering through war, and where do they get that money from, and how do governments even make money? And then, of course, you end up at central banks quite quickly, and that was the arc of the story.
You think it was an inside job?
Yeah, I still think it was. Yeah, I still think it was. I mean, we don't know. That's my point more. I don't. It doesn't really matter what I think. We don't know because there hasn't been a true investigation with subpoena powers and really looking into it. Everything, all of the evidence was just destroyed. And you just get a plane crash, and usually they'll get every single piece of that plane and reconstruct it. None of that happened. Nothing got reconstructed. Everything was just sort of put under the table. Bush got questioned without any sort of, like, he had to have his mate in there. I don't know. It all just seemed so sketchy.
And then the wars were in support of the petrodollar. That's sort of the story, how you see it fit together.
Yeah, that's how I see it. Yeah, the petrodollar and resource wars. They're basically resource wars, and also just people, the industrial and military complexes wanting to push more wars, because wars, I mean, every soldier is worth like 15K in terms of the equipment they've got on them and stuff. So if you're selling the vests and the guns and the cars and the bullets and there's a lot of money to be made. And yeah, everyone's sort of chomping at the bit. Oh, wow, I want to sell some stuff.
Yeah.
and people are naive to think that doesn't happen.
Yeah. So in one sentence, for listeners that don't know that, the petrodollar is the idea that the dollar gets a lot of its value from countries being forced to sell their oil in dollars. That's a good summary, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because Bitcoiners understand that pretty well. So you see in Bitcoin or any of the coins, everyone celebrates when there's someone else that, Amazon's toy, like one of them was Pornhub's now using Verge, and everyone gets so excited. Why? Because it means demand for this thing. So the petrodollar is like forced demand for the US dollars, which makes it the thing that you have to buy to use. And it's really very similar. So but we've seen also that doesn't really work that well if no one's using it. So and printing it like crazy is I mean, we all know it, but I've said it a couple of times recently because some people just don't understand it, especially, and I hate this whole left-right thing. I can't stand it, but I'm going to say it, especially on the left. A lot of people don't understand that you just can't print money like the minimum, not the minimum wage, where everyone gets the universal basic income. A lot of people are talking about this all the time, and I say, guys, currency it isn't valuable. Currency doesn't have value. It just measures value. It measures value that's in the system, and if you print more of it, it measures the same amount of value, guys. You can't just and it's the first people that get hands on this new currency have that full purchasing power. After that, it trickles down and gets less and less as this inflation happens. So,
well, I will say I had someone on the show yesterday from Brazil. He was not a lefty, or at least I don't think he was. He was a Bitcoiner and he was a former equities trader, and he did support basic income. Actually, I don't think he would support it by printing money, but that's not necessarily the only way you can do it. You can do it through tax.
Yeah.
I would say I'm fairly undecided. I agree, of course, that printing money is just going to dilute money. But the idea of basic income, maybe, I don't know, I'm undecided. I find it interesting to think about.
Me too. I find it fascinating. The whole basic income thing I find fascinating because the robots are coming.
Exactly. Exactly.
AI is coming. They're taking a lot of jobs off the table. And maybe it's not all jobs, for sure not, but a lot. And we do need to relook at something. And my first business was a swap business where people just traded things without any money. You know, I really like your shirt. Do you like anything of mine? And then we just swap it. And one thing I found interesting with that is it's kind of also a solution come the robots. We just have all this stuff and we just trade it instead of having money. But it was a bad idea. We saw that I needed money in the system or a token or something, because if you don't like anything I have, then I can maybe buy it off you, and with that token that you can use in the rest of the market. It just makes sense.
You rediscovered money.
Yeah, exactly.
So we mentioned gold briefly, and being a prepper briefly. Were you or are you expecting an economic collapse?
Yeah, I still am. Yeah. You know, the
What's that
interesting
going to
thing
look
is,
like?
well, it's already looking like it. Like you have a massive separation of the market. Right now, I tweeted about it yesterday. I think there was a picture on Reddit as well of
We both
Jim
tweeted it.
Cramer. Yeah, you saw it as well, right? Jim Cramer standing there, and in the screen behind him, for those that didn't see it, it says the world's biggest uptick in the Dow since 1936, and it's all green. And down underneath, it's like 6 million people have lost their jobs, and there's a total separation of reality. So this is the first step to a collapse in the dollar. Now, a lot of people they think when collapse happens, shit, we're all buggered for like years, which is true in a way, but governments tend to remake an economy pretty quickly. But it's new money, it's a new currency, something new happens. If you look through at Russia's history, the collapse of the USSR, people suffer for like 3-4 months, and then a new money system comes up and people start to move it. Of course, it kills probably 2 generations in terms of, not kills them, but their job prosperity, and destroys savings, absolutely decimates the elderly savings and pension funds and stuff. Yeah, but gold is
that's the difference. I totally agree. Of course, the difference between the real economy and the stock market, these are just numbers at these points. It has very little to do with anything.
Yeah, and it already started before the lockdowns happened. Even just as Wuhan was starting to get locked down, we were seeing all-time highs on every indice around the world, mainly in the States as well, but in Germany as well. Everything was up. And then you'd hear stories like, not Qantas, some of these Asian airlines all grounded, and no one's flying to China. Yet those same airlines were having green all-time highs. And so the separation already started happening there. And I was thinking, what's going to happen? And if I wasn't so stupid, and I would have shorted the whole market and sat there drumming frantically, like the guy from The Big Short. But but I'm not that ballsy. I should have been, because it was so obvious that it was going to come down.
Yeah. What is going on with HSBC? I saw you tweet about it.
Yeah, so HSBC's, they have 90% of their pre-tax profits out of Asia, and the supply chains of Asia, even, I made a video about it, trying to be funny sort of thing, and it was all about the fact that HSBC have all these credit lines to all these businesses, and supply chains work that if one of the business goes down, then the whole supply chain drops, and those people can't pay back their loans. So now that you have this huge international, it's not just HSBC. It's pretty much every bank are going to struggle, and we're going to see a banking crisis.
If HSBC fails, that would be enough to that would be the Lehman kind of.
Yeah, it would be that moment, and it would show a huge domino effect. The thing is, the reason why I talked about HSBC is because they're the custodian of the GLD, which is the gold ETF, the major gold ETF. So if they're holding all that on their books, and this is why ETFs are so terrible, is because they're the owner of the gold. You might own some ETF, but you don't own it. You own an IOU. So all that gold is on their books, so they can speculate it with it. They can rehypothecate it. They can do anything with it, including bail themselves out or have a bail-in with that gold. So if they were to go down, they could use those holdings to bail themselves out. And
Interesting.
so,
And
yeah.
because I know, and this is why you know, well, you know because you're a gold bug, but you also know because you're the CEO. You're the CEO, right?
Yeah.
Of
Yeah.
Vaultoro, yeah. I'm just making sure.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you have a
Good.
different structure, I think, right?
Yeah, that's right. So we deal with allocated gold. So allocated gold means it's your gold and it's your property, your legal property. It has nothing to do with us as a company, apart from that we put you with a seller together and we keep the records of who owns what. But we can't legally touch it. It's not ours to touch. We can't touch it. We have a contract with a vaulting supplier, a vaulting facility, and a top tier one in Switzerland, and we just connect either people or we sell to the market and we buy back as well. But this is very different. So even if we go broke, liquidators can't touch our clients' assets because it's nothing to do with the company. And this is so different to a lot of these financial instruments. A lot of these financial instruments are on purpose on the books of the company because it allows the company to inflate themselves and then borrow against all the holdings that the users are holding. You know, we can't go to the bank and say, look, we've got all this gold, because we don't have any gold. You
So,
know,
and then these companies that hold the gold right now, Vaultoro customers, their customer, they have this gold allocated to them. Are these companies under any sort of risk of going bankrupt, or are they just literally holding gold and nothing else? And
yeah, I mean, we use Brinks as a top tier high security vaulting facility. It just sits there. I mean, there's guards with guns to pay, I guess, and I mean, there's insurance that gets paid, but that's all paid for the user. The user pays for that, so they pay for auditing and insurance. We have an interesting thing happen though in Germany, including actually the rest of the world, is that we're seeing a separation of the physical gold price and the paper gold markets. The paper gold markets were tanking and still tanking. Meanwhile, there's just no gold to be found, or silver. You can't buy it anyway without like 60% premiums on top of spot. It's just the weirdest thing. And then on the news, they won't mention that. They'll say gold down again. And it's like, no, it's not. If you try to find it, it's not down. And this is also very strange. So it was actually kind of hard because we have
the news is reporting on the paper price, not on the actual price.
Yeah, the news is reporting on that, and this I find really fascinating. You know, I think it's one of those moments as well. It's a flag for me about the entire system. You've got this separation of the paper and the physical. You've got the separation between the stock exchange and reality, and
what about the price of gold on Vaultoro then? Is that also is that priced on the paper price or the physical price?
It's priced on the physical, but it takes into consideration the paper price, because it's a marketplace of people buying and selling. It's an order book like every other exchange, like Kraken or Bitstamp or anywhere else. We sell gold into the market as one of the sellers and one of the buyers, but a lot of people just trade amongst themselves. If you've already got gold, you just put an order in a certain price that you're happy with, and you determine that price from, usually a lot of people, they just have a look at the gold price on, you know, the internet, and they determine like, oh yeah, that's a good deal, and they put it down there. But so it changes, but on some days you get a large run up of people wanting to buy, so the gold price will go right up. And sometimes you get a whole bunch of Bitcoiners that are like, oh, Bitcoin's going to go up this week, so they like flood the market down. So a lot of people could buy gold really cheap.
It's more volatile.
It's more volatile because of Bitcoin, because we're just Bitcoin gold. You know?
Interesting.
Not Bitcoin gold, it's shitcoin.
I didn't get you on the show to show your company, But this sounds
Yeah,
like,
sorry guys, I didn't mean that, but it is interesting, this price ratio stuff, you know.
no, I find it very interesting. I was just gonna say this sounds like if you're looking for gold and you can't find the physical version, it's actually a pretty good idea. Maybe
Yeah,
right now.
yeah, and
Have you seen an uptick in users?
yeah, absolutely. We have a sister company called Bar9, and it's seeing even more because it's just a pure fiat gold gateway, and it's yeah, so many people like, oh, they just don't trust reality right now, and they don't trust the banks, and this is really scary because banks are sort of the thing that people trust most. If you walk around and ask people, they hate them. Everyone hates the banks. They're like, yeah, fuck banks, but they trust them. They trust that they're going to be there somehow. Especially
You have the
German.
fuck bank shirt, right?
Yeah, yeah. We had Vaultoro fuck banks shirts because I just think, why trust an establishment with your savings and allow them to gamble with it on the stock market? What's with that? How come people allow that? You know, they don't allocate that money. When you put money into a bank, it's not your money anymore. It belongs legally to the bank. You know, it's the same as the ETFs. Like, it's not your stuff. I don't know. It always perplexes me that people. I mean, that was sort of our point with Bar9. We try to make a savings solution outside of the banks so that people could save in gold, but then get fiat back anytime they want. So they didn't have to trust banks because banks are only insured to 100K. And you can insure gold to how much you've got because it's a physical thing.
Right,
And that's,
interesting.
yeah.
So let's speculate for a minute. We were talking about HSBC. Let's assume we have this Lehman Brothers moment with HSBC. What's this gonna look like this time? Do you expect hyperinflation? Do you expect something else? What will we see?
Yeah, with the amount of printing going on, I do suspect hyperinflation and a total deflation in terms of people having jobs and stuff. At the same time, I see a very a certain class of people, and I hate to talk about classes because it's very Marxist, but it's just how it is. There are a section of society that will be very, very well off, and they are the intellectuals, they're the programmers, they're the people that have good educations. But I think the minimum wage jobs, the shit kicker jobs, they're really going to struggle. I think because they're so easy to fire, and we're seeing it now. Like, you see, even jobs that are very, very that do take skill, like being a chef at a restaurant. So many just fired. They're fired. Everyone's just ditching employees, and it's just terrible. So those people are really suffering, and it's not. You can't just turn the switch back on. You can't just go, okay, now we're all free again, and we've got a vaccine, and it's all fixed, and you can go back outside, and everything will be back normal.
So how
Things
do
have to
we get out of
rebuild.
this?
It's just slow. It's slow. Like, you know, if you've lost everything, you put your whole life savings to a business, it's gone. It's not like you can save up those life savings and start another business. A lot of these people might be too old to do that, so they then have to just go on the pension. That means more, on the heart sphere, like the dole, and it means there's more resources on the state. That means the state needs to sell more bonds to borrow more money, which causes inflation. Everything goes up. Now we'll see what happens. I think the poorer countries like Italy, I think the EU is also going to struggle in terms of its ability to say that they're relevant, because in a huge crisis they're sort of like, I don't know, we well, what are they meant to do? I mean,
At this point, I'm wondering if the EU will even continue to exist with everything that I'm seeing around me.
yeah. And for me, you know, a lot of people say, I particularly, the only thing I like about the EU, and I love it a lot, is the freedom of movement and freedom to work wherever you want. I think it's so important as a society to be able to go, right, there's jobs in I don't know, France, so I'm going to go and work there without like borders and even the central currency. I don't. I like the idea of, because it's easy. But now with smartphones, I can easily send you a Bitcoin and you get, I don't know, even through atomic swaps, get a Litecoin if that's what you want. Like, you know, in terms of currency switching and stuff. So things are a lot easier now. I don't think we need that one currency to rule them all.
Yeah. Do you think, how do you think gold is going to get out of this? And then we'll get to Bitcoin after that. Or you can address them at the same time, up to you. How are gold and Bitcoin going to get out of this?
I see. It depends what happens to the currency, because gold and Bitcoin only measure the rest of the stuff. It's the same with corn or oil or flour, wheat flour, all of these things, commodities. That's what you should measure Bitcoin on. You should always measure Bitcoin on how many bushels of wheat does a Bitcoin buy you? How many bushels of wheat does an ounce of gold buy you? Because that's where you start to see real value. How many pork bellies? How many, you know, a commodity against commodity. And once you start seeing that, and just cut out the fiat noise, because the fiat is just a total distortion of the marketplace that you can't make heads or tails anymore of it. But I see real problems. That one of the biggest things that really concern me, Aaron, is that we still haven't managed to get Venezuela to take Bitcoin seriously. And that to me is such a disappointing fact, because if we can't make Bitcoin work in fucking Venezuela, where their currency devalued more in the bear market after 2017 than Bitcoin did, I just think, what are we doing wrong? And in the same period of time, we have companies out of China like Alipay starting to pop up everywhere, and they're younger than Bitcoin is at this stage. So
well, I'll give you my speculation then, maybe. The reason it didn't catch on in Venezuela, or one reason it didn't catch on in Venezuela, was because the dollar was still there. So Venezuelans wanted dollars, right? Because that's also a fairly good store of value. Now, if the dollar would start to inflate, and if everything starts to inflate, then there's no better fiat currency anymore. And then maybe gold or Bitcoin would be the only alternative. I'm thinking out loud, of course, but
that's a really good point. It's a really, really good point. Yeah.
Do you think? Yeah. Do you think Bitcoin would be ready for a situation like this?
Nah, not yet. It's close. Like you know, we do a lot with the Lightning Network. We sponsor all those events and hackathons and stuff, and we do see really good projects coming out of them, which I love. But they're just still very, very technical to get started. They're getting better. Like there's a lot of Lightning wallets now that are fairly easy to use, but still channel capacity, things like that are still an issue. So it's getting better though by the month. So I think the Lightning Network will be ready for prime time. You know, it's not like, yay, now we're open. It's slowly people get in, as you know. But I think, yeah, in about 12 months, I think we'll have really serious good software for the Lightning Network, including point of sales systems that can, you know, keep books properly and not, you know, and have watchtowers, making sure you don't lose money. And that then yeah, because we can have then millions of transactions going on at the same time without anything affecting the network too much.
What about gold then? Do you think the world could go back to a gold standard?
No, I don't think so. Gold standard's not even that good. I mean, it's also a manipulation. You know, you're saying that $1 is always one gold, and the thing is, what it does actually is it stops people from discovering new gold mines, because they're like, what? I can't even speculate with this because it's never going to go up in value. It's always going to be worth one of this paper money. So it locks the price of gold in to a certain value, which means that a lot of miners stop finding new mines, and then less supply happens. And this is actually one of the things that caused a problem in the 30s, is that gold standard was there. But I don't think it's the worst system. I think it would be better than the system we've got, but I don't think it's the best system either. I do think that people should be free to use gold if they want, even have crypto backed by gold, or use Bitcoin. And for me, it's about having free markets of money competing against each other, even having private currencies. You know, a lot of people in the crypto space shit on altcoins and private currencies like BNB and stuff. But I think it's like, let them all compete. If people trust a certain thing as a store of value and it can move around and be fluid, then hell, it should be used as money if they can make it work. Great. And that's how you keep the bastards honest. That's how, by competing in a true free market of money.
It's a bit of a Hayekian view,
Yeah.
I think, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I agree and disagree. I agree that we definitely need a free market for currency, for sure. I just think that Bitcoin will win. And it has this sort of network effect. And the same with languages. We're speaking English because you don't speak Dutch, so we just settle on English. And, I think that we'll see that with money and everyone will just settle on Bitcoin. Scalability, of course, is a challenge. I do think that's a challenge. So even with Lightning, Bitcoin, I see Bitcoin as a kid. And it's like the world is falling apart and we can't ask this kid to save it yet. Like, but
no, I agree. My personal view is also the exact same thing. Bitcoin, my eggs are in the Bitcoin basket. But I don't see, I'm not one of these like, screw Bitcoin Cash, screw you guys. I don't like that they try to trick people to saying that that's the real Bitcoin. But in terms of them competing, fantastic. I mean, go for it, compete. But I don't think they're going to win. I think Bitcoin's going to win, especially now that we have this halving happening. We've already seen hash rate dropping on Bitcoin Cash because the amount, Bitcoin's had 10 years now to slowly gain value. And so when you have a halving, you have enough value for those miners to deal with. But when you're sitting at $120 or $200 or whatever they're sitting at Bitcoin Cash, it's not enough if you just cut the supply in half. There's just not enough money there. So the hash rate just drops through the floor. So they're in a hard spot. I think it costs one Bitcoin now to 51% attack Bitcoin Cash for an hour.
I think so. Yeah, I think that sounds about right. Yeah. This is a nice topic to close off with. Speaking of the halving, what do you call it? Halving or halvening?
Quantitative hardening.
Even better. What do you expect of it? Is it priced in?
Yeah, to a certain extent. And then there's also hype, which will continue going until it happens. And I mean, we'll see what happens. It's always interesting because I don't think you can look at the past and say that'll happen again. But I remember the last two halvings, it's been always doom and gloom. The first halving was like, oh yeah, let's see. It didn't really make a difference. I mean, it did. It halved it, but it was too small. But the last two is like, it was a lot of like. I remember the Brian from Epicenter Bitcoin.
We've only had two, right? This is going to be the third one.
The third, this is the third one. Sorry, it's been a long night, but the last one, I remember there was a lot of people saying that it was going to collapse, that it was
that's spiral.
The hash rate would collapse, and then people would drop out, and it was 51%, but never happened. It just went up, including the hash rate.
Yeah. All right. Very last question. What do banks and the movie Cats have in common?
Failure.
That's the only part of your video I saw because I just found it 5 minutes before doing the interview. I thought maybe you want to mention it. You started something as well.
Yeah. I just started the show. We're all stuck at home, and I actually wrote that piece about HSBC about like just as COVID was starting to come out, and it was just still an Asian problem. But the supply chains are still relevant in that, because a lot of the supply chains are throughout Asia that are still closed down, as well as the Western world. So I think it's still a relevant video. People should check it out on the Vaultoro channel. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and they find you on Twitter on @Vaultoro as well, I think. That's your Twitter
It's
handle,
at
right?
Vaultoro, but I've changed it to my personal one now, because I'm a bit. My Twitter handle's @Scigala, so JSCIGALA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I thought it was interesting. I thought it was fun.
Yeah.
We're pushing about
Thanks
an
a
hour,
lot.
right? So
Yeah,
it's time
yeah.
to.
Just one question for you. How are you dealing with it all in terms of, I mean, you've started this podcast, or did you start it, or you've been continuing it?
Yeah, I started it about 2 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago. For me, I've been following Corona pretty intensely since late February, so not super early, but and I in a weird way had the same thing as with Bitcoin, where you find something and you just can't stop thinking
Yeah,
about it and focusing
yeah,
on it, and it was this sort of obsession which I slipped into. The
yeah.
difference, of
Man,
course,
same
is
with me.
that with Bitcoin it took years to play out, and now it was just sort
Yeah,
of a couple of weeks. And
yeah,
I figured I wanna do something with it, so I started a podcast where I just talk with Bitcoiners about Corona. That's sort of the idea. I'm
yeah.
enjoying it.
Well, the interesting thing was that I found that Bitcoiners, I don't know if it's just because I move in these circles, but the Bitcoiners were the first to really understand this as
There
well.
was a there was a lot of overlap. I noticed.
Yeah,
Yeah, interesting.
yeah.
Probably has
And I
something.
think that,
Go for it.
no, you go, man. You go. I talk too much sometimes. Just go.
Yeah, it probably has something to do with sort of exponential growth and figuring
Yeah,
out numbers and looking at data yourself, not just trusting the media, but looking at the base
yeah,
data and drawing your own conclusions, sort of thinking independently. I think a lot of Bitcoiners like to do that. And
yeah,
also, of course, it's relevant with all the economic situation and how Bitcoin plays into it. So it's an interesting match that Bitcoiners got interested in Corona on a pretty large scale.
man. I would have said that word for word. Exactly. Yeah. Because a lot of people, they don't think in exponentiality. Normal people, they can't comprehend how intensely slow that is, and then how intensely fast it happens very quickly. Whereas Bitcoiners somehow do. The ones that, especially the older ones, they really like, oh, something there. So yeah, and the data and looking outside, thinking outside the square, not caring what other people think as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool, man. Well, I'm looking forward to the next episodes.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot for being on. And have
No
a good
worries, Aaron.
take care. Stay safe in Potsdam.
Thank you, my friend. Cheers, mate.
Cheers.